PMP6 exam prep step by step. Let's get going. Let's talk about this course first, about this course. And as we step into this course, let me welcome you, wherever you are, to this course. And I will be going together through this course over this month, over 20 sessions. As you know, this is a step-by-step course, and we'll go through each of the chapters in the PMBOK guide, and we'll end with ethics, and we'll end with some of the exam tips. If you have not, you can have a look at the schedule that is there in the website. That will give you details how we'll move forward with this course. Now, this is a course about PMP certification. This course will prepare you for the PMP certification when you appear for the exam. And because of this, what I would like is to just give a quick run through on what are the steps to take to actually apply and what to expect when you sit for the PMP certification exam. So firstly, when you apply for this PMP certification course, they look at eligibility. In terms of eligibility, they look at three things. One is education requirements, experience requirements, and when they talk about experience, they talk about the last 8 years, and then finally they talk about, or they look at rather, training requirements. In terms of education, if you have a bachelor degree or global equivalent, essentially, which means if you have a 4-year degree after school, and if this is what the education requirement you have, then the experience that is required is 36 non-overlapping months of project management experience. That you have been in a project and involved in the project management for 36 non-overlapping months. By non-overlapping months, it really means if you have been in projects, 2 projects simultaneously, then only the time for one will be taken into account. Now, of these 36 non-overlapping months of project management experience, they need or they require 4,500 hours experience in leading and directing projects. And and if you don't have a bachelor degree, if someone has just high school diploma or as a degree or global equivalent, then the experience is a little more stringent. They need 60 non-overlapping months of project management experience and 7,500 hours experience in leading and directing projects. In both the case, PMI needs 35 contact hours. The eligibility in terms of training requirements is 35 contact hours of project management training. Now, please remember that these contact hours is different from PDU. I'm specifically mentioning this because there is a lot of confusion about contact hours and PDU. PDU, or professional development units, is not what is required or relevant when you are applying for PMP exam. PDU comes in play only after one has obtained PMP certification, and to maintain that PMP certification, one has to have certain number of PDUs over, they need to accumulate certain number of PDUs over specified period. So PDU is not relevant at this point when someone is applying for PMP certification. Now, in terms of the application process, this application needs to be submitted through their website, pmi.org. and it's an online application. Once you submit the online application with all the education, all the experience, and so on and so forth, PMI confirms eligibility, after which you will be able to go ahead and schedule your exam. And they typically confirm this eligibility pretty soon, within a few days. Having said that, some of the applications go through an audit process. And the applications that is taken up for audit is picked up completely at random. And so there is no way to know which application will go in for audit and which will not. Now, it also needs to be remembered that only a very small percentage of applications goes through the audit. Hardly 22 to 3% of applications go in through the audit. When it goes through the audit, it takes an extra step, but otherwise the step that is taken is pretty straightforward. What we essentially need during the audit is some kind of proof in terms of the education and training and the experience. It takes a little more time, and that's why they'll give you additional time for scheduling the exam if it goes through the audit process. In terms of exam fees that is required when you schedule an exam or when you want to schedule a PMP exam, if you're a member of PMI, which is a Project Management Institute, the fees is 405, and if you're not a member, it is 555. And if one thing that it is worth remembering here is that you don't have to be a PMP to be a member of PMI. So what it really means is, if you look at these numbers, one can become a PMI member and then go in for the exam or pay the exam fees, in which case they'll save some amount because of the differential that is there between member and non-member exam fees. And not only that, when you become a PMI member, what you'll find is they give a lot of free resources. For example, the PMBOK guide, based on which this particular PMP certification exam is done, that will be given as free as a download copy when you become a PMI member. So it is generally advisable that one becomes a PMI member and then apply for PMP certification exam. In terms of exam, there are 200 questions that needs to be attempted or that needs to be answered within a span of 4 hours. Now, having said that, there are so-called 25 seeded questions within those 200 questions. Now, what this really means is these seeded questions, the 25 seeded questions, are questions that you will not be graded upon. In other words, you'll be graded upon only 175 questions. However, as a candidate, as one who is appearing for exam, for me, there is no way to know which is the seeded question and which is not. So I have to take every question as if they'll be graded. The passing score, though they have not published or they don't publish what is the passing score, but generally it is understood that the passing score is 61%. In other words, if you score 106 correct out of 175, then you pass the exam. Now, these questions are distributed across 5 domains. Now, we'll talk about these domains, and there are 5 domains in terms of initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, and closing. And the way questions are distributed are in this percentage that is shown here. For example, planning has 24% or closing domain has 7% of questions and so on. So this is an overall picture of how you will go and apply for PMP certification, what kind of eligibility is required, and what is the format of the exam and what you can expect during the exam. Now let's talk about three terminologies that we will come across very frequently. And so let's understand these three terms so that there is no confusion as we move along. When we say PMI, it is the Project Management Institute, the institute that provides the certification, that provides the curriculum, that develops the curriculum. That is the institute we talk about, and it is called PMI. Then, when we talk about PMP, PMP is the credential, is the certification that is provided to you when you pass that exam. It is an internationally recognized certification in the project management space, and you'll find more and more companies, when they look for project management applicants, they look for this credential. So this is why it is becoming more and more important to have this PMP certification. And then finally, the PMBOK guide is the guide or the handbook that has been developed by PMI. And the PMP certification is really based on this PMBOK guide. In fact, our course will be based on this PMBOK guide. Now, if you see, this is the 6th edition because PMI keeps on developing this based on feedback, based on input from project managers across the world. And this 6th edition has actually recently come out, and even the exam, PMP exam, moved to the 6th edition only the latter part of March of this year. Now, some of you might have looked at PMBOK 5th edition, and you are now stepping into 6th edition. So I'd like to just touch upon very quickly what has been the changes from PMBOK 5th edition to the current one, which is the 6th edition. Firstly, the section 1, 2, and 3, which are really the introductory sections in terms of environment, in terms of the introduction, and so on and so forth, that has been completely rewritten in PMBOK 6th. PMBOK 6th edition now places much more emphasis on adaptive environment. As you would know, that Agile has become so important in the project management world, and then more and more projects that are run on Agile methodology. So with that in perspective, PMI has taken into consideration the adaptive environment, and all the processes have been looked at from that perspective. And so compared to 5th edition, there's much more emphasis on this adaptive environment or Agile processes. Now, what we'll also see is this PMBOK will be divided into many processes, and these processes are divided in knowledge areas. So when we talk about knowledge areas, we'll discuss, for example, the cost management, we'll discuss about schedule management, we'll discuss about scope management, and so on and so forth. Now, these knowledge areas, there will be 10 knowledge areas we'll be discussing through this course. Now, 2 of those knowledge areas have actually changed when they moved PMBOK 5th edition to 6th edition. And also, different processes has undergone change. For example, one process got totally eliminated. They took away that process. In fact, they took away that and merged it with another process. Then two more processes were added, some move, some change, and so on and so forth. So this is really the gist of the changes that went in when they moved from the 5th edition to the 6th edition. In terms of the structure of this course, like we mentioned before, this course is based on this PMBOK guide, 6th edition. So we'll move through different chapters on this PMBOK guide. And as we move through the first chapter 1 to 3, we'll talk about the project fundamentals, and then we'll go through different knowledge areas. There'll be 10 knowledge areas, as well as when we move through each of the knowledge areas, we'll look at each of the processes in each of these knowledge areas. And when we look at the processes, we look what are its inputs, what kind of tools and techniques, and what are the outputs, and so on and so forth. So this is how the course is structured. I'd just like to add also, in this, we'll also have one module or one day we'll spend entirely on the agile processes, because agile is so important in or agile methodology or adaptive methodology is so important in the 6th edition. Now, what can you expect from this course? First and foremost, as I have mentioned before, when I send out the information, this course is completely free. There's nothing that you need to spend on this course. In terms of schedule, we'll have it every weekday, and accepting holidays, which will, I think there's only one holiday that comes in play, which is July 4th, which is day after tomorrow. And it will be held at the same time as you have signed in for. Now, if you miss a session for some reason, then you'll find a recorded version that will be available on YouTube. So if you miss a session, you can always look at that, and then so that when you come for the next session, you are current on what has happened in our course. Now, in our final module, I'll be providing the exam tips, because when we go in, or the way we look at projects, typically we look at it from the experience that we have in terms of what projects we have seen. And sometimes our view of projects can become a handicap when we go in to appear for this PMP certification exam. So these exam tips will tell you what kind of perspective to avoid and what kind of perspective to take when you go and sit for the exam. As well as we'll talk about ethics, because there will be ethics inclined project questions in the PMP certification exam as well. And finally, I would like to be very clear on how or when a PMP participant certification gets success. Now, I have to be very frank on this, because PMP certification is, whereas it is not really difficult to pass the exam, as you've seen, you just need to have 61%, but it's not trivial as well. The trick to actually successfully pass this PMP certification is to be very methodical in approach. And very methodical in approach, and you have to make a plan and follow through that plan, and then only you will find it very easy to move through the exam. Now, if you are actually planning to go and sit for the exam, and you need a success plan that I have and many of my students use, just email me and I'll send you that success plan. Now, with this in background and this brief background on what this course is about, let's start. Let's begin with our first chapter, which is introduction. Now, when you see this, like I said, one dot introduction. Please remember this one dot or that number refers to the chapter in the PMBOK guide. So when I'm moving through this course, if you want to look at more details, you want to understand more details in that particular chapter, you can always go into the chapter based on the number that is being referred in this course as we are discussing through this course. Now, an overview. Let's start with an overview. And what better overview can we have other than the history? So let's look at history of project management. And when we look at the history, the first question, of course, is when did it all start? When did all this project management thing started? Well, as you can see this, we have had projects thousands and thousands of years back. And you see this, if you really think back, this construction of this pyramid must have been a huge project at that point of time, so much back in the past. So what is the big deal about the project management? Now, what has happened is over time, and especially in this 20th century, earlier part of 20th century, different tools have developed. And it started with small ad hoc tools like CPM, critical path method, control chart, Gantt chart, and so on and so forth. And when those were being used, they found that, well, things improve, things are more predictable. No, we understand better where we are going, we understand the roadmap, and so on and so forth. Now, at around 1969, PMI, the Project Management Institute, was formed. And what they have done is they found that now project management can be very complex. And so they developed the book of knowledge, PMBOK, which was the first edition. They developed that based on inputs from project managers across the world and put together what needs to be done to have a successful project. So now if you look at this history, what does this really mean from when thousands of years back, huge projects were done to what is happening now? The way I look at it is, at that point of time, much back in the olden past, much back in the past, these projects or project management was more an art than science. And today, it is more a science than art. At that point, it is likely that for one successful project, there have been many unsuccessful, many failures in project management. Today, with these techniques, technologies, and with greater understanding that we have, what is happening is we are seeing much more predictability, much more success in terms of projects. Now, let's look at some examples of project. Why we're looking at these examples of project? Now, when we think of project, typically what happens is we view project or projects the way we have experienced in our professional life. But the scope of projects is much beyond that. So, for example, a project can be a project like this Taj Mahal, which was an exquisite construction project. But a project can also be an event, an Olympic event, where so many different pieces have to be brought together to make it a successful event. Or a project can be a book, writing a book, that can be a project. A project can be designing a car, new car model, or a project can be when your kid comes home with an art project. So you see, these are some examples, but there can be many other different types of projects. So projects, what we are just trying to say is it's not just the IT projects that we have in organization, or a finance project that we have in organization, or a construction project, but there can be many, many different types of projects. With this understanding of the projects and the history, let's step into some of the foundational elements on project management. First and foremost, the question is, what is a project? I believe we need to clear that out early on, because we'll be talking about this project all through the course. Now, to clear that, let me give you an example, and then we'll get into different parts of what it is a project, what is a project, and its definition. Let's say we are constructing or building a power station. A power station that will generate electricity for the community, nearby community, or for its consumer. Now, when we build this power station, we construct the facilities, we construct the building, we get the machines, implement the machines, and so on and so forth. And once it is done, we hand it over to another team, the operations team, who will run these machines, and that will generate electricity and pass, and this electricity will be transmitted to the consumers. So the project is only that part where we build that power station. Now let's look at that. What is a project? A project is a temporary endeavor by its definition, which really means it has a definite beginning and end. So this power station that we built as a project, it started at some point of time and it ended at some point of time, after which we handed it over to the operations team, to the maintenance team. Now project, again, it creates a unique product, service, or result. In this particular case, in this particular example that we're talking about, this is a unique power station that we created. There has been no other, because this didn't exist before. And this is a unique. There might be other power stations, but those power stations are different from this one that we have just created. Then, so this is the unique. Then we have to remember that it is different from ongoing repetitive work. Now, sometimes, again, there might be some question on this to confuse you, but this is one distinguishing feature. And as we have provided an example here, the project stops when we have handed it over to the maintenance for running the machines and generating electricity. So that repetitive work to actually generate electricity and run this machine day in and day out is not part of the project. So it is not a repetitive work. The project is not. And finally, a project can be done by a single person, can be done by a group, or even multiple organizational units. Typically, if it is a big project, it will be done by maybe 50, hundreds of organizations to come together to do it. For example, if you are doing a bridge, or even if you're doing a big power station, then many different organizations will come together to the different specialized work that they are experts on, and all of them will come together to do the project. As opposed to that, when we do a project in our organization, it is typically a small group of people will come together to do a project. And sometimes there is a single person project, like we saw, maybe your child has come with an art project, and that's a single person project. Now, what does a project create? Now, we have seen an example where we have created a power station. That was our example. But what are the things that it can create? There are different things it can create. One is it can create a product. And when we say product, it can be component or an end item. For example, here what we're seeing is an iPhone. The creation of the iPhone itself can be a project, or the creation of the chip inside it can also be a project. A project can also create a service or capability. Let's say in your organization, you want to introduce a new function which will do Facebook marketing. You don't have that capability at this point. Now a project is formed and people are brought in and all the facilities are brought in, and a new department has been created, new function has been created to provide Facebook marketing. So that was a project to create a service or capability. Or a project can also be an improvement access. Let's say you want to make the processes in the organization or manufacturing process in the organization more efficient. So you look at the logistics, you see how things can be made more efficient, and that can be a project, or it can be Six Sigma projects where the quality is improved in your organization. So it can be an improvement in product or service. And then a project, again, can just be an outcome or result. For example, when you do research, the research can bring out a document, research project. Or let's say you are doing a feasibility study, which will give out as an outcome a feasibility document. That can be a project. In this case, you're not creating a product or you're not creating a service, but you're creating a document, an outcome. And that is what the project is creating. So in essence, a project can create a product, it can create a service or capability, or it can create an improvement in product or service, or it can just create a result, an outcome, or document. Now, in organization, what transformation does a product or project bring? Obviously, when a project is brought in and so much effort and money has been spent on a project, some change is expected. Otherwise, why would the management, the leaders even approve of a project? So let's see what is the transformation that takes place. We have on the y-axis the business value of the organization, and on the axis we have time. So at this point, which is the current state, in initial time period, we see a certain business value. And when a project is done, and all the activities are performed to complete the project, what would happen is the business value of that organization is going to change, or is going to go up, because of which this project was approved and executed. Now, when we say business value, there can be two types of business value. One is tangible. Tangible, that is directly measurable, like assets, equity, utility, tools, market share. Those are tangible values, so tangible business value. As opposed to tangible, there can also be intangible business value, those that you cannot directly measure, but they can bring a lot of value in the long run and in a hidden way, like goodwill, brand, reputation, and so on and so forth. So what we're saying is the way the transformation takes place because of project activities, the way business value goes up when a project is executed. Now, how does a project get initiated? Now, when a project is initiated, there are always some triggers, some initiation triggers that actually brings the project. And there are different factors that come in play, and there are all these can be put together in 4 categories of factors that makes the leader, the management of the organization decide to undertake a project. So one of them is what we say meeting regulatory or legal or social requirements. For example, there might be a new reporting requirement that is required by the government, because of which a project is initiated. Or sometimes a project can be initiated because to satisfy some stakeholder requests or needs. Let's say a stakeholder wants a new system, because of which a project is drawn, a project is initiated. Or there is some, you need to implement some change, business or technical strategies. For example, a new technology has come in and you want to take advantage of this technology, and this is when you might be actually initiating a project. Or, for example, you might want to create or improve some things or processes or services, like we talked about in our example. You want to have a new function, Facebook marketing. So that is creating a project. So these are the different categories of factors that initiates a project, and that makes the leader of the organization decide to start a project. Now, project management. Why project management, and why project management is so important when we are talking about projects? Because when we do project management essentially is application of different tools, different skills, different processes, and to successfully execute the project. So why we have to think so much about the project management, spend so much time in planning, putting together the process? The reason can be explained by taking 2 different examples. First, let's look at poorly managed projects. If you think back in your experience, if you think of some projects that you felt that was not run well, you can relate to some of these points. A poorly managed projects you'll often find there are missed deadlines. Missed deadlines as in some deadline has been promised and it was not met. It was said, hey, I'll deliver this in 2 months, but no, it didn't happen in 2 months. It took 4 months and so on. There were costs. It was said we'll finish it in $50,000 or $100,000. It was not done. It took much more to actually complete the project. The quality that came out was not to the satisfaction, and lot of changes, lot of errors were found after it went into production. Or even when we were doing the project, there were a lot of rework that needed to be done. Because every time you do some testing, you find there are errors. So you have to rethink, redo, redesign, and so on. The project gets expanded because every other time user will come and say, this is not considered, that is not considered, we need that, and so on and so forth. And at the end of it, you'll find the stakeholders highly unsatisfied and very dissatisfied with the way in the project is done. So these are signs of poorly managed projects. Project management was not done well, or probably not done at all. Then, when you compare to this, compare with some projects that you are proud of, or you have seen, or it has been an example project in your organization, they have had effective project management. The signs of effective project management are, for example, they're meeting business objectives. When it was executed, it was giving the business what they really needed from the project. It was more predictable. When they said it will get over in 6 months, it got over in 6 months. Or if they said it will take $100,000, it took $100,000, not more. Then there is increased chance of success. Where effective project management will really means that chance of success is much, much more than if it is not. Of course, there's always a risk, even with the best project management, because there are many external factors in play. But then, when you have an effective project management, you are following the processes, the chances of success will increase manifold. The resources are optimally used. There is no waste of resources. And if there are constraints, they have been managed. Well, we'll look at these different constraints. For example, if scope changes or cost changes, and how all the other things that is adjusted has been managed pretty well. So these are this thing, and at the end of the day is if there are some changes that takes place, because when you are running a project, you will realize that changes are inevitable. There will be many different changes that comes in the project, and when you have an effective project management, the changes will be much better managed, as opposed to a project where it has not been managed. Changes can create a lot of chaos in the project itself. Now, let's talk about this concept of project, program, portfolio, and operation. What it really means is a project is not something that should be looked at isolation. In an organization, the way it works within the environment. So let's look at what really happens in an organization. In an organization, let's take an example. Let's say there is a hotel chain, and let's take a hotel chain that we all know of. Let's say Holiday Inn hotel chain. The Holiday Inn hotel chain, they found that there is an opportunity in Asia Pacific, let's say Singapore, Thailand, Korea, and Indonesia, and so on and so forth. So they want to open many different hotels in that Asia Pacific region. So what they are going to do is, as a result of this, they are coming up with a strategy to go deeper into that Asia Pacific market. And so as a result of the strategy, they'll create a portfolio. They'll talk about, and this portfolio is what all needs to be done to achieve that entry into that Asia Pacific market, and to have all these hotels in that area and to gain a share of that market. And this will be managed, and this portfolio will be a collection of all these projects, programs, and so on and so forth, and will manage as a group to achieve strategic objectives. Now, because the strategy here is to gain entry into the Asia Pacific market. Now, once that has been identified, the strategy, it will be broken down into, now, well, to achieve that, we have to have different programs. We might have to have one HR program, which will be about getting resources to run that when it is up and running, to another, and so on, and have skilled resources to run that. Let's say that is the HR program. There might be a market program to ensure the clients or the prospective clients, they know about the new things or new hotels that are coming up in this region. And there will be some construction kind of program where hotels will be built, and so on and so forth. So let's say there are 3 programs that have been identified to actually support this portfolio. So this is the program that we are talking about. Programs is comprised, and it will comprise of projects or other work or sub-programs and so on, and it is coordinated in support of the portfolio, because now we are looking at each of this program, and the objective of these programs that we talked about, HR program, construction program, and the marketing program, the objective really is to support the portfolio that has been derived from the strategy that have been identified as entry into the Asia Pacific market. Now, this program, again, we look at each of this program and see what are the projects required for each of this program. For example, in the HR, we need skilled resources for that. Now, there will be maybe 2 projects here, just as an example. For the HR program, to get skilled resources to support that initiative, there might be one project which is a recruiting project. Recruiting appropriate resources or appropriate resources from the market, advertise and interview and so on and so forth, that will come in play. So a recruiting project. And then after recruiting project, there might be one which is a training project. The people who are recruited and even people who are transferred, what kind of training needs to be provided to them to support, to be able to properly support those new facilities that are going to come up. Construction project, again, we look at what is required to construct each of these hotels in different locations and so on. And then in the marketing, there might be a group which is a marketing research group or a marketing research project, and one might be, an IT project which will actually support the marketing initiative. So you see, each of the program can have different programs or different projects or sub-programs. These projects that we're talking about can be within or outside the program. And this project, like we said, they are linked to organizational strategy through organization portfolio. For example, the example that we have given, these projects are within a program, and each of the program is within the portfolio, and this portfolio is derived from the strategy. Having said that, there might be a project which is not within any program, but it's outside that program and is just supporting that strategy or the portfolio. And then when the projects are done, it is passed on to the operation. Of course, this is outside the formal project management, because once it goes to the operation, project stops and then it moves into the operations. Project comes to an end and it is handed over to the operations team for the ongoing operations. Let's look at it a little more diagrammatically. Now, it all starts with organization strategy. Organization strategy gives rise to organizational portfolio. So organizational portfolio is where you talk about different projects, different programs, and so on and so forth. Then each of the portfolio can have sub-portfolio. In other words, if the portfolio is too big and is difficult to manage, you might want to break into smaller portfolios or sub-portfolio. And then our organization portfolio can have programs the way we talked about, HR program, marketing program, construction program, or they can just have projects. For example, there might be, in this example that we talked about, there can be a project which actually is an analytical project just to find out how the portfolio is doing with time. Then each of the portfolio or sub-portfolio can have a program, just like we talked about a program within a portfolio. And this program can have projects, and again, sub-portfolio can have projects, just like portfolio can have projects. And you are seeing program can have sub-program, and sub-program can have projects, and program can have projects. So this is the overall picture how the strategy leads to portfolio, portfolio leads to sub-portfolio program, and they again lead to projects. And in an organization, typically, this is how it is all structured, if you really look at it closely. Now, let's look at, with this understanding that we have about portfolio, about program, about projects, let's look at each of them a little more closely. Portfolio, as you've seen, is a centralized management to achieve strategic objectives. Basically, it's a first level view, a first level management or to achieve strategic objective, because we saw this portfolio is derived from strategy, organizational strategy. And in the portfolio management, the focus is on resource allocation prioritization. In other words, when the portfolio management leaders or senior management will sit together and talk about the portfolio management, they'll talk about what kind of resource needs to be provided and what should not be provided. Because typically what will happen in an organization, there is always a limited resource. And it is possible that many different things are required. And at a portfolio level, they'll analyze and see, okay, depending on where our strategy is going, we can have only this one, and this is not so relevant to our strategy probably. So this is how you prioritize and align to organization strategy when you are looking at the portfolio management. And the projects, programs, sub-portfolios that comes under portfolio management, they may not be directly related, but they are, all of them will be actually satisfying the portfolio or the strategy of the organization. When you look at the program management, you will see that all the projects within a program, they are related in the sense that they have a common objective or common outcome. Just like the example we got about the HR program, there were two different projects, but their objective was really to provide skilled resources for the facilities for the new initiative. So projects under program, they have a common outcome or they have a collective capability. And the focus, when you look at all the issues, this is about interdependencies. For example, in one project within a program, the resources that is required, there might be target, pull and push between what other projects in the same program is required, and so on and so forth. So there might be interdependencies. And all the decisions within a program, it typically is related to the interdependencies. You might resolve resource constraints or conflicts across the projects. And for example, in this particular case, recruiting project, you might be using some resources in the recruiting project. The same resource might be used in the training project for the HR program. And then you might have to balance how much of this resource you want to put in the recruiting projects, how much of this resource you want to put in the training project. And it's aligning to strategic direction and change management with governance. So all this comes into play in the program management. Now, organizational project management. Let's look at it in a totality. What is this organizational project management about, and in a graphical form? So what really happens is, as we have discussed, it all starts with a strategy. In the organization environment, it starts with a strategy. Now, the strategy leads to portfolio. And when we talk about portfolio, we are making value decisions. Value decisions are really decisions that we are investing so much. What is it that we're going to get in return? Those are the kind of decisions that will be made. Now, once that is done, from this portfolio, we come up with programs and projects. Now, to satisfy this portfolio, we'll see, okay, these are the programs that is required, and these are the projects, and they are about results deliveries. They deliver some results. This is why the programs and projects are there. And this results and delivery that is coming out from these programs and projects is to satisfy the portfolio. Now, what happens is, after the project is completed, it goes into operation. And when it goes into operation, this is when you get the business value realization. So it's in the portfolio, you decide what kind of value you are getting, and in the operations, you realize that value because of the projects and programs that are executed and that has delivered the results. Now, something important is happening here. When you program and projects, when you deliver the results, there is a loop, and you can see what is the business impact analysis that goes. So it is kind of loop. So it will, when you're doing a value decision, you will see if these programs and projects are providing that. There will be some impact analysis on what it is delivering. And there might be some portfolio review and adjustment that takes place if it is not delivering what is expected. And at the end of it, when it goes into operation, there will be some kind of value performance analysis to see that it is meeting the strategy, or how much of the strategic objectives are being met when this portfolio, these programs and projects have gone into operation. So this is really the overview of the organizational project management. So we'll stop here at this point of time, and I'll talk to you tomorrow again at the same time. And if you have any question, please feel free to drop me an email. And I'll also post this on YouTube so that you can have a look again at a time convenient to you. So thank you very much. I'll see you tomorrow.